Alright, and welcome to our first lecture where we're actually going to start doing some work inside of Illustrator. This is this video here, so if you have clicked on this, you're watching the video, so you know which one you clicked on. All my videos too will be on my YouTube page. So if you go to my YouTube, type in Sean Sarcona, Sarcona S. Oops, I spell it right. You have to click on this, search for Sarcona S, and there I am. Those are not my real glasses. I have playlists, and one of those playlists is 1200 Summer 2017. So that's where I'm going to house all the videos. So you can definitely look at those. I also have some motivational videos here. I have some 3D stuff, some Photoshop stuff. So definitely a lot of stuff on my YouTube. So that's where it's going to be. Make sure that you're not going to understand every single thing we're doing here, but you should understand at least 80%. If you don't, watch the video again and again and again until you do. I also like to have with me the hotkeys, so I will have the hotkeys up on my secondary screen, and I will also have the definitions up too, especially for you. If I say something like color group, then you'll know what I'm talking about, because you could just see what that color group means without just skipping over it and assuming that you'll figure it out later. Okay, so a lot of these will kind of help you. All right, and I may call up some of these as we go. So I'm just going to scoot that over to my secondary screen, and I'm going to open up Illustrator. Okay, so now this is Illustrator. Now this isn't the default setup of this. This is actually like how I've customized it. So I actually have a palette that's already up here. I'm going to close my Illustrator again just so you can see. And I'm going to open it up. So I'm going to go to Illustrator. I'm going to hold Control Alt and Shift, or if you're on a Mac, Command Option Shift. And I'm going to click on Adobe Illustrator, and I'm going to still hold these down until I get this little pop-up message. And the pop-up message should say, do you want to reset your preferences? Okay, so wait a minute. All right, so it deleted my preferences. It did not have a pop-up. Sometimes it will for some of the other Adobe applications. Apparently Illustrator does not have that. So you'll see here that everything has been kind of reset back to the default settings. I like to set up this other thing where I go to my preferences and go to general, and I don't like there to be the recent files, so I just turn that off. So I just hit OK. Show start workspace. I don't like that. I just like to be right here when I get into it. Okay. So that's fine. This one's still here, but I can just move these around wherever I need to. Okay, so now it's reset to my default setup. I'm going to make a new document. Okay, now when you go to File, New, and you're making a new document, here's where the recent ones, so as you make new ones, these ones will pop up. You may have some saved preferences, and then kind of new to the CC stuff, you'll actually see different presets, which is kind of awesome. We didn't really have these back in my day, but they're nice to have. Illustrator does not deal with inches. You could definitely set stuff to inches over here if you need to. It doesn't really deal with pixels either. It's more of like, just eventually the proportions is what we're looking at, because we can always resize stuff in Illustrator, which is really awesome, and not lose any resolution. So just for now, I'm just going to set this to be, let's say, a 10 inch, so that's 10 inches, and by 10 inches. Okay, so we have a 10 inch by 10 inch document. Okay, the orientation isn't going to matter for this because it's square, so what does it matter? And then artboards will leave here. We'll leave all this stuff, and then we also have RGB or CMYK. So if this is going to be something that's going to be on screen, you're going to want to leave this at RGB. But if it's something you want to print, then you'd want to use CMYK. And what these two are, if I go to my definitions, CMYK is a way to define colors for print using cyan, magenta, yellow, and for whatever reason, K means black. I guess CMYB didn't have the same effect to it. And then RGB, which is down here, a way to define colors for screens using red, green, and blue. So basically any digital device is using RGB, but where your printers use CMYK. So if you want your colors to look accurate, you typically want to work in CMYK. And for the stuff we're going to be doing, we will be working in CMYK. Even though it's going to be displayed on a screen, we still want that to be in CMYK. Okay, we can ignore that for now. Here's the default or the previous window that used to come up. So you can set up different things here. You can go to templates, set up profiles, you know, whatever. So that's fine. CMYK 10 inches by 10 inches. Everything else is good. All right, so here's my document. All right, so over here is our toolbar. So these are different selection tools that we'll get into. Here's a pen tool. We'll be using this guy a lot. Here's a curvature tool, which is kind of neat. That's a newer addition. Line segment, type tool, rectangle tool, paintbrush. You can go through these. If you hover over it, you get not only the name, but you also get a little shortcut key right next to it. And if you look at your hotkeys, you'll see there's the tools right there and their hotkey associated with it. Now this doesn't show all of them. This shows the ones that you're going to use most of the time. Okay, so it's good to remember these things because you'll be able to work quicker. All right, you'll also see there's a little triangle in the corner of some of these. Like this one doesn't have it, but that one does. If you click and hold, you'll see that you get different options. Okay, so if I'm on the pen tool, that's the hotkey P. The add anchor point tool is the plus sign. The delete is minus. The anchor point tool is shift plus C. Okay, and there's other ways to get to these too, but for now you could just kind of see that set up. There is an object or a selection tool, which is just this one, which will select the main part of stuff, and then there's this direct select, which allows you to grab components of it, which we'll see later too. All right, so Illustrator is a vector-based program. Okay, again, go to our definitions. We can look up the word vector and says a mathematically calculated way of drawing items which allows scalability at any size. Okay, and this is the great thing about Illustrator is just to show you, and I'm going to open up Photoshop too while we're going through this just so you can see it, because they really do two different things. So I'm going to go in here and create an ellipse. I'm going to click and drag, and that creates an ellipse. Some hotkeys is while I'm clicking and dragging, if I hold Alt or Option, if you're on a Mac, that will drag it from the center. Okay, so it's kind of important because if you may want to drag it from the center or you may want to drag it from here. So Alt is a great helper because it allows us to do that. You'll see that it's making an ellipse, not really a circle. If I hold down Shift and I start dragging, you'll see that now it's constrained to a circle. Okay, if I let go of Alt and still hold Shift, you'll see that it still draws a circle, but not from that corner, right, or not from the center. Oops. Let me just hit delete on there. Drag it again. Okay. Now we also have the space bar. Okay, so let's say I didn't want it drawn right there. So if I hold down the space bar, I can actually move where I want that drawn. Let's say I want it drawn there, and then let go. So right now I'm holding down Alt, Shift, and space bar. Okay, and then I'll ignore that thing popping up. Come on, cancel. All right, so I'm going to go to my selection tool. Okay, so I could hit V, and I'm going to zoom in. Okay, now it's a hassle to switch between the zoom tool and selection tool because you're going to be doing this quite often, zooming in, zooming out. So what I do is I hold Control and the space bar, and then I can zoom in. Okay, I'm just clicking. Okay, and I'm getting closer to this line because I want you to see something very, very important. So I'm zoomed in 17,000% right now, and that line still looks super crisp. Let's go to a Photoshop document. And I'm going to make a new document. I'll do the same-ish type settings here. Inches. 10 inches, and you'll see there's a lot of similarities between the two softwares, which is wonderful. I'll set this to CMYK just so you don't think I'm trying to do anything shady there. All right, so Photoshop does not have a rectangle tool, but they do have this tool here, which if I hold on it, there's the rectangle tool, right? So I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna click and drag, If I hold down Alt, it drags from the center. I hold down Shift, it makes a perfect circle. If I hold the space bar, I can move it. Okay, so I'm going to put it about at the center, right there. I'll even make it big, like that. Okay, and it filled it in. I can change the color of the fill right here, and I'll make it black. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to use the same thing. Control spacebar, hold Control, hold the spacebar, and then I can zoom in. Now Photoshop, I can click to zoom in, but I also click and drag, which is pretty awesome. Okay, so now I'm zoomed in 1400%, and you can see the little dotted lines here. Okay, little stair stepping. This is pixels. So Photoshop actually draws in pixels. So every single one of these squares is actually a little pixel that gets filled in with color. And each pixel can only have one color in it. So this pixel here is black, this one's gray, and this one is a lighter gray, and then this one is white. Okay, so that's how Photoshop works. Switch back to Illustrator. Illustrator is zoomed in at 17,000%, and it's still perfectly smooth. Now, when this prints, or we're looking at it, it definitely is seeing tiny squares, because that's what our computer screen is made up of. That's what our printers are made up of. But the difference is that it's refreshing it. So as I zoom in, it's actually redrawing the shape. So if I zoom back out, so I can hit Control minus to zoom out, Control plus to zoom in. That's another way to do it. Or Control 0 to fill it to the screen. No matter what size this is, as I resize this item, Illustrator is going to always redraw it. And that's the cool thing about vector, is even if I drew this thing super duper tiny, like that big right there, okay, and then I decided, you know what, I want it to be huge, and I do that, it still maintains that shape. Okay, so you can see I'm dragging just like I did in Photoshop to zoom in, which is awesome. And you see how crystal clear that is. I'm at 28,000%, still crystal clear. In Photoshop, let's go back here. I'm just going to do something here, just to click that. Let's say that I resize this to super tiny. And then I said, ooh, I want that to be bigger. I hit Control T, I scale it up, and you'll see that what happened is it didn't remember what the shape was. Because I'm dealing with pixels, it basically just stretches that image out, okay? So that's where Illustrator and Photoshop are completely different, is that they're going to be drawing things in a different fashion. Now what that means for us is that we have to kind of attack our drawings a little bit differently. In Photoshop, if I wanted this to be blue, I could grab a paintbrush and just, paint the entire thing blue, and then I could paint different shades on here. In Illustrator, it's not like that. We can't do the same kind of techniques, okay? We can create the same results-ish, but we have to be a little bit different in how we work, okay? So let me delete this. So I just click on that and hit delete, and it goes away. Let me draw another shape, okay? If you need to, get in the habit of just drawing stuff out. You'll notice that there's some pink lines that are popping up, and that's called smart guides. And what these do is they help you kind of draw stuff in a way that makes it easier to draw. So even though I'm not holding shift here, the fact that I have the vertical pink and the horizontal pink or magenta, that means that I am perfectly even. It is a circle. As I squeeze inward, it goes away. But if I hold shift, I'm guaranteed that that would be perfectly square. Okay, even if the lines aren't there, it is still a perfectly round circle. You'll also notice that when I get to about here, there you go, you see a pink dot coming from the center of the page downward. That's saying that it's lined up with the center of the screen. Okay, if I hold the space bar and I move my circle over, come on, oops, sorry, hold Alt and that, eventually, come on. No, it doesn't want to do it now. Let me undo. All right. As I move it around, you can definitely see that it's doing it. It's showing me where the center of my page is. So as I hold Alt and drag from here, that's actually bringing it from the center of my screen outward. And because my document's square, you can see that this is pretty square here. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so this is our rectangle tool, and we'll use this one a lot. So rectangle, ellipse, polygon, star, even rounded rectangle. Okay, you'll see that each one of these is going to give you a different shape, obviously, and different options. If I click on this with my direct select, okay, so I don't want to click with this, because if I click, it'll bring up a window saying what size of an item do you want, and you could definitely just type these things in. but it's typically better just to draw it out how you want it, unless you need something exactly sized. You'll see that there's these little circles in the corner. I can drag these circles in and change different properties. Okay, so when I drew with the circle tool, the ellipse tool, I switch back to my selection tool, there was none of that. Okay, if I click on this one though, because of the kind of shape that it is, it allows me to on the fly adjust that property, which is pretty awesome. Now if I were to switch to just the regular rectangle tool, you'll see that this also has it. So even if I just drew a regular rectangle, I can still get it to be a rounded corner rectangle by using some of those options. If I go to my poly tool and I drag, there's what I get. Switch to my direct select, and you'll see that this one also has that same feature where now I can adjust what that looks like. And the cool thing is you can adjust it even after you've tweaked it. You can come back and still kind of tweak it a little bit. Okay. Now if I switch to the direct selection tool, which the hotkey is A, you'll see that each one of these corners now has one of those things. Back in here where I did the regular selection with V, I only get one, and this controls all of them. If I hit A, this controls each one individually. So I can basically tighten this one here. Oops, let me click off, click back on, there we go. I can adjust this one here, and this one here, and not adjust the other ones. Okay, and the same thing on this one. I can click this and drag right there. And the same thing on this side. I click on the path right between them. And I do that. Okay, so very cool how we can select and modify each one of these shapes and really customize what we want them to look like. Now each one of these items that are here, like I said, they have their own options. So when I did the circle or the ellipse, it came up with two different options, or three different options. This one has two. It has a radius and the number of sides. So I could change the number of sides in here, and now I have a triangle. Okay, or I could add more sides just by clicking, typing in, let's say 20, and there it is. And again, because I have this, now I have that ability to tweak all of these things. Okay, so lots of different options. Now when you draw something in Illustrator, it's basically creating a path that goes around it. That's what this thing is. And you'll see as I hover my direct select over it, it shows that. And then it also has a fill. So way down here at the bottom of the tool palette, here is my fill color. Here is my stroke color. Okay, so stroke is the outside piece. So if I click on this, this will bring up my color palette, and I can slide this over and pick different colors. Now you'll notice that my circle isn't changing. I never selected the circle. I deselected at some point. So I'm going to reselect this. There we go. Then click on that, and then I can change the color of this path. Okay, click off, then you can see it. I could also hit the change button here, and that'll swap these two colors. So if I decided I want the pink to be the fill and the white to be the stroke, I could do that. Switch them back, or I can just click on it and then choose what color I want that to be. And this one, maybe make this one a blue. Okay, so we can really customize what this shape looks like by doing that. Also up here, we can do that as well. Now if I click on this little, if I click on this, it'll bring up the colors. If I click on the arrow, it'll bring up pre-selected colors. Okay, so these are all color swatches, colors that we've saved or color schemes that we've saved. And you can see there's obviously transitions, we have gradients, we have solid colors, we have some color schemes that are over here. We have a gradation, of black to white we could adjust. And then we also have this where we could add new swatches. We could duplicate swatches. We could open a swatch library so we can grab different properties. And then as you'll see later in the class, you'll see how we can get even more colors to help us color our stuff. Okay. So lots of different ways that we can color this specific item. So these are just the colors here. These are just those colors here. Typically the stroke is going to be the one with a little knob in the middle. And this one will be the fill color. Now we also have the size of the stroke. So if you click on this, it'll bring up the stroke palette. So you see how I can click on like a lot of these things up here. Anything with an underline you can click on. And you can change more options. So I just click that off, I get a couple options here. If I click on it, I get a whole bunch more options. Now for something like this, I usually like to have an actual palette open, just like this color palette. Okay, So under window, you'll see a lot of these here. Boop, 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 boop. Stroke. All right, so here's stroke. Control F10. There it is. So here's the hotkey, or here's the specific one that's for stroke. So if I click that off, click it on, you can see how I can bring it on here. I can also drag this. So if I click and drag, if this is something I'm using all the time, I may want to just keep it on screen. Just keep it over here all the time. Okay, so now let's go and adjust some of our properties. So if I take the weight of the stroke, I can really crank this up. So let's say it says 10 points. That's what the PT stands for. 10 points going all the way around. We also have some options for caps, corners, aligning the stroke, making this dashed. So again, we can kind of customize what that looks like. We can also do arrowheads. Oops. If I take the stroke down, that will take the size of the arrowhead down. I could also manually scale the arrowhead. There we go. Okay, not as impressive when it's so small. I can make an arrowhead that way too. So I have 2 arrowheads. Looks kind of weird, but whatever. I can change my profile of the curve. Let me get rid of these arrowheads so we can see that better. And I'm going to turn off the stroke here by just filling it with nothing. There we go. Just so we can see this profile a little bit better. So you'll see before it was on a uniform profile, perfectly even all the way around. And then I switched it to one of these other ones, and what it does is it changes the thickness. And this is really good for creating shapes that are not consistent. Something that's more along the lines of like a pen or something in calligraphy where you wouldn't have a constant thickness of a line. And you can make your own as well, so you don't have to be stuck with these. You can change any of these profiles, make new ones, whatever. Oops, click on it and then change it. There we go. Okay, so lots of different options here. I'm just going to grab my color, and if I double click this, it should, oops, other one, it should open up this color picker, and I could pick a different color. And usually I'm going to pick colors this way. There we go, so that looks pretty cool. Zoom out, there it is. All right. But a lot of these options are up here too. So you see we have options here. We have even more options right here. This is something that isn't down there. You'll also see that you can hide some options. If you only want to see the stroke, you can show options. And this will be consistent across all of these palettes where they have different options that you can show or change. So you'll see the little button at the top there. So if you're not seeing something right away, maybe click on that and see if you can find it. Or obviously check inside here to see if you see what you're trying to get to. Bloop. So I'm just deleting that guy. I'm going to make it just a regular circle. And I like the faceting in that other one. All right, so at this point, we're about 20-ish minutes into this video. I would pause and make sure you can go through that stuff and create some basic shapes just using these, okay? Ignore the flare tool for now. That's kind of like I don't really use that one. But these other 5, use those. Practice drawing different shapes. Practice using the Alt key, the Shift key, and the space bar. I'm sorry, space bar and the Shift key to draw these shapes out. Also practice going in with the different selection tools and then tweaking some of those parameters that we have. Okay, so everything I've done to this point, make sure you're kind of comfortable. Don't just watch this video and think you're going to absorb the information. You need to tweak that information. You need to play with it so you understand it. All right, so now I'm going to move on. So if you've paused it, came back, and now you're on the next part, now we'll start looking at some other stuff. All right, so far, every time I delete, I'm using this selection tool and clicking on it and hitting delete. But if I click on this one and I hit delete, you'll see that it definitely all goes away too. But here's a trick. If I click off of it and then I come back and I just click on one piece and hit delete, you'll see how the path between these two areas now gets deleted, but the rest of the shape is still there. Okay? So now if I go into this, and these items before didn't really do anything because it was like one solid shape. But now we should see more stuff happening. So I'm going to take my stroke up a bit more. You can type stuff in too, or you can pick from this drop down. And I'm going to change this cap to a circle. So now you'll see that instead of having these squared off ones like that, now we have nice rounded ones. Or we have this one which extends past it and is square. Okay, so it all depends on what you want for that specific tool. We also have corners, so we could say, you know, I wanted rounded or beveled joints. Now in this one, we're not going to see a whole lot of difference, but I'm going to switch to my pen tool by hitting P, and I'm going to come over here. Now look at the icon when I hover my pen tool over this little anchor point, okay? It turns to a minus. So if I click on it, it actually gets rid of that point but still keeps the path connected. If I hold down Alt and I click on one of those points, it turns it into a sharpened point. Okay, so I'm going to hold down Alt. Oops, I'm actually going to click on these 2 points. There we go. And then hold Alt and just click between these. There we go. Okay. So before we had a circle that was nice and round. We only had 4 points that made it up. But because I was in the pen tool and held Alt on each one of those points, it collapsed it. So now they're perfectly rectangle. So here's where I can change the corners. So now we have squares. Now we have round. And now we have bevel. Okay. And then we can also say aligning the stroke. Do you want the stroke on the inside? Do you want the stroke on the outside? Or do you want it centered? Okay. So again, more options. And as we get into more assignments, we'll start playing with these a lot more. And you'll also see too that now that this is no longer a square or a circle, I do get these, which I could then go through and round those off myself if I needed to. Okay. Let's close that. All right. All right, so here's the difference in these two tools up here. Okay. So this one is a selection. So if I select it, I'm basically selecting the entire object and I can move that object around. If I click on the direct select, I can click components of it. So I can grab just an individual point and delete it, or an individual point and move the individual point around. I can grab one of these items and change how that looks. Okay. Round that off. Round this off. I can switch to the pen tool with P, maybe get rid of these 2 points because I don't like them, or I want to add a point. So I can just click on a point right there, hit A to get back to my direct select and move that point over, then click on this and round that off. Okay. You'll also see that there's these little handlebars out here. Those will become really important on our actual first assignment. As I click and drag these handlebars, it actually will change the weighting of that. Instead of being perfectly round, I can change how it's going to blend from one side to the other. Okay, so again, more customization, more ability for us to go through and really tweak what this is looking like. All right, and again, I can still change that stroke at any point. I can get rid of the stroke by clicking on it and saying no stroke. I just go back to this and give it a stroke. It picks that same color it had before. Pretty awesome. Okay, so these 4 tools, or 3 tools here, the pen tool and these 2 selection tools, we'll use these like most of the class for most assignments. Okay, so get comfortable with doing that. Get comfortable with just using the pen tool, and you can create your own shapes with it. So if I just click with the pen tool, close it off, there's my shape. Or I can click and drag with the pen tool. There we go. And now I have a curvy shape. Or you can do both. So if I click, I'm just clicking, and then I can click and drag and click and drag and click, click, click and drag. Okay. You can really start to, again, customize what you want these shapes to look like. Because that's the power of Illustrator. That's where all of our work is going to be done, is creating basic shapes and then either coloring them or shading them or moving them, aligning them, whatever it is, to create some more advanced stuff. Okay, the rest of this stuff that's in here, we will definitely be dipping into it, but first things first, that's what I want you to be aware of. Okay, so what else? Layers. So under Window, there's another one called Layers. So if you forget what these things are, and the hotkey is F7, Photoshop, the same thing, F7. The icon for this one is this guy, so we can click on Layers here. And again, this is something that I'll typically have open on the side that I like to keep open. I don't like it to be just like popped out over there. Okay, so I usually drag this out. You could, if I go to my colors, or my stroke, which is right here, I can grab this tab and stick it in the same area. So if I needed to, I can jump between these two, or I could have stroke on one side and then layers on the other, or whatever. Okay, get comfortable with the interface, customize stuff, see what works best for you. The idea is if you constantly go into the same area, you want to make sure that it's available. You don't want to have to hunt for it every time. Okay, so here's what layers are. So if I drew a shape like that, and then I drew another shape, okay, if I wanted this shape to be in front of that shape, I can do a couple things. One of them is I can go to Object, Arrange, and I could say bring to front, bring forward, send backward, or send to back. And what this does is it changes the order of these layers, okay? Because each one of these items, if I click this little arrow, will be on a separate layer. And the layer that's on top is the one that's actually on top over here in our work area. So if I click on this, you'll see that this one, this one has a little blue box next to it. So he's on the bottom right here. This one, the little blue box right here, he's on the top. So if I were just to go and grab either one of these, and depending on which one I clicked, I would either be bringing it to the front or sending it to the back. That will change their order. Okay, so that moved that layer below it. Okay, so now he's behind it. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to hold down Alt while I'm in my selection tool and just drag this over. And I'm just going to scoot that like that. That's good. So now I have this guy in the front. So he's on the very top layer. There's a little blue box. I'll click on this one. He's in the second one. Click on this one. He's on that one. Okay. And I don't know, just to maybe make that or similar, we'll just do that. All right. So now what I can do is, let's say I want to take this one and then move it forward. Okay. So now this one is in the middle. So I could just drag this up. Okay. So that's again another way to do it. It all depends on how you want to do it. I'll tell you, for most things, I will use the bring to front or bring forward hotkeys because they're just so ingrained in my brain. That's what I will do. Okay, so if I needed to, I can click on this one, Control Shift right bracket, and that brings that to the front. This one, Control Shift left bracket, and that brings that one back. Okay, or I don't do Shift, I just do Control, and what that does is just move it up one notch at a time. Okay, up, down, up one or down one, depending on how you want. Now when we get done with this, we'll have like a billion layers sometimes. Not really a billion, but a lot. So we want to keep these organized. So if we double click on the name of the layer, we can call these boxes. Okay, so these are my boxes. Now I want to create a new layer and make new stuff on it. So I go to the little menu, remember I showed that before, make a new layer, and I'll call this one circles. I can pick a color for it. Right now it's not terribly important. I want to show it obviously and print it and preview it and OK it. Okay, so now I'm going to go over here to circles, and I'm just going to draw a couple circles. I'm going to hold down Alt while I drag this, and then I'll make a copy. There we go. Didn't need to be there, just whatever. All right, so now let's say that I wanted these circles to be below the boxes. So I click on this and I go to Object, Arrange, and I say Send to Back. Okay, didn't work. Control left bracket, Control Shift left bracket, doesn't work. I'll do the same thing to all these. Okay, nothing. Maybe I need to move the boxes forward. So I'm gonna grab all these boxes. Object, Arrange, bring to front. Nope, they're still behind it. Okay, now the reason for this is because the circles are on this layer. This layer is on top of that layer. So as we arrange things, move them up, move them down, whatever, it doesn't take them out of this layer. It still keeps them inside here, but it just changes their order. So if I wanted all the circles to be below boxes, I'll move all the circle layer below boxes, and now they're all below it. Okay, so as we start working on our stuff, you may find that I can't get this to be behind this item. I want these to be here, but I want this one to be below it. Sometimes we have to put it on a different layer and move it below it and organize it and whatever else. So let's say I wanted a new layer here. And you'll use more descriptive names than just single circle. And what I'm going to do is drag this little red box to that. And what that does is it reassigns it. Now look at the color. If I click on this one, it's a blue outline. This one is a green outline. This one is a red outline. Remember those colors that we picked over here? Those are the colors there for each one. So now if I click on this, I know it's on the green because it's green. I can drag this below boxes, and now it's below that box, while the other ones are still on top of it. Okay? So think of the layers like transparent pieces of paper. Each piece of paper has a different shape on it, and if you want one shape to be below another one, you have to move it around. Now I can't, or I can drag this into a new box. So I can grab this ellipse here and drag it into this box, and it'll put it inside that layer. So now they're both in there. That's another way to do it, but I can't drag it out of here. Okay, if I move this down, you'll see how it just moves that whole layer down. I can't do that with an individual shape. That doesn't work. It has to be inside of a layer. These guys are just shapes that are on that layer. Now the other thing that we can do is we can group layers too. So if I grab all these layers and hit Control, what? Oh no, sorry, that's Photoshop. You cannot group layers. You cannot group layers together. They are all on their own. Yep, that's just Photoshop. That's so stupid. But whatever. All right, so you have to make sure these guys are staying organized so that you get things layered on top of how you want them to be done. So, and this will be the other thing that's kind of, you have to think about. This circle here is behind that one. And if that's how I wanted it to be, that's perfect. But I would never draw like just this circle here, okay? I would never try to, just to show you, where's my pen tool? I would never try to draw a circle that fit right on this line. And that's usually what people try to do. This isn't a perfect circle either. They'll try to draw it here, and then they'll try to match it up right along this line. There's no reason to do that, because that's just kind of like a waste of space, because this is now not a full circle. It's much easier to just know that it's behind it and know that it goes like way back there, okay? So just don't worry about ever trying to line these up perfectly, these two shapes. Just use the layering to your advantage there, okay? All right, and so I can grab everything and delete it. I can grab layers and delete them. I still need one layer in here. Make sure you're naming your stuff. Make sure they're organized here. Even your shapes that you've created. Okay. It does help to go through these and rename these too. Okay. Obviously, better names than what I'm doing. There we go. Okay. So now we have names for each one of these. And if they're named correctly, you can actually click this box and it'll select that item. Okay. So if you know that this is, let's say, wheel 1, but you can't see wheel 1 anywhere out here to select it, you can just go into your layers and click that button and it'll select wheel 1, and then you'll know exactly where it is. Okay, let's go to what else? Save as. Okay, so I'm going to save this. So you remember before we had folders we created for our Dropbox stuff, and we copied those folders and we put them somewhere where we're going to be working on them. I put mine anyway, in summer 2017. Here we go. I have a Sarcona 1200 S17. This is my work folder. This is not my upload to Dropbox folder. Okay, this is all the stuff I'm working on. So if we're just playing around, I'm going to go into my pathing area, and I'm just going to call this Sarcona Playing. Illustrator files are Adobe Illustrator AI files, so keep that in mind. Always name stuff with your last name in there. Don't just call it playing or pathing or whatever. It has to have your name. And then save. This window will pop up. If you ever need to go back a version or several, this is where you could do that. Okay. Everything else in here is fine. Cool. So now I've saved that document. Okay. So that's enough playing for now. That should be enough just to get you into Illustrator, creating some shapes for the first time, and being able to create layers, color things, and save things. Okay. So then the next video you're going to watch will be the pathing assignment. Okay. So when you're ready, you're done, you're playing, then you can jump to the pathing assignment and then start working on that first actual assignment you'll turn in.